live to tape. Either way works for us.
Yeah.
So Scott Tomorrow from the Ohio Education Association, President, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate it. OEA, by the way, represents what, 120,000 some?
A little over 120,000 public education employees, including teachers and education support professionals, as well as some higher education faculty and people that work in state institutions and county boards of BD all across the state of Ohio.
So you have a lot of bosses, 120,000 some of them.
We do.
Well, let me just, I guess we'll jump right into the school year right now, those questions. How are you feeling about the school year, the return to class? What do you think it's going to look like?
You know, it's going to be different depending on where you are in the state. The governor has refrained from issued any blanket orders for the most part in terms of how schools can reopen, and left a lot of those decisions up to the hands of local school boards. We also know that the virus is spreading more in some communities than it is in others. And so in some places, we're going to have schools starting remotely. In other places, we're going to have schools starting every day in person with, of course, we hope a lot of modifications to keep people safe. And then in some cases, you're going to see some kind of hybrid approach where some groups of students are coming in maybe for part of the day or every other day. I've even heard one plan where every other week, and then learning remotely when they're not in the building.
Do you like that idea of leaving it up to local districts, or do you think the governor should have come out with a blanket statement and said, you're all going back, you're all going to be hybrid, or you're all going to be remote?
No, I think the decision about what teaching and learning looks like is appropriate to be made at the local level. It's based on the needs of the community. It's based on, again, what the priorities of parents and educators and communities are for any given situation. What we would have liked to have seen more of from the governor is clarity around public health and safety guidance. So far, originally, the only requirement that the governor issued was a requirement for staff to wear masks. Yesterday, he updated that order to include students K through 12. We very much welcome that because that's consistent with what the science says and what the CDC says, for example. We would like to see more strict adherence to other public health and safety protections, including things like 6 feet social distancing, strict hand washing and sanitizing protocols, also protocols around health checks and quarantining or isolating people who are positive or exposed to the virus.
So what do you think will happen if you do have someone, a teacher or a student, in one school who is exposed or comes back, not exposed, but who comes back testing positive? What should happen then in that case? Do you close the entire school? Do you isolate the classroom? What are your teachers saying?
Well, what we're hearing, and a lot of this depends on the recommendations from public health experts, but generally if someone is positive, then it's important that you have really strong contact tracing protocols in place. And anyone who's been in direct contact with that individual should be required to stay out of the school building until they've had a chance to demonstrate that they're symptom-free after a period of time, or
which could be like
taking
2
a
weeks,
test
right?
to show that they're negative. Yeah, I mean, and that's true in other settings as well. We're seeing that in other places of employment. In order for that to work, though, you need to make sure that you do have widespread testing available. You also have to make sure that that there is, a great deal of diligence to make sure that we are tracking who people are coming into contact with. We want to make sure that ultimate care is followed so that anybody who's exposed to the virus is protected. And so I think schools are probably going to have to err on the side of caution that if there is an outbreak in a given classroom, that to make sure at least those people that are in that class, and maybe the people in that school, stay home until we know that it's safe to reopen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of steps to retrace. Just for one kid even, imagine, 10 kids in a classroom. You were talking about masks. The governor did say yesterday that all kids K through 12 should wear a mask if they're in the building. Is that, I know you said that's a positive step for safety for teachers. Realistically, though, can a teacher keep a mask on a kindergartner during the day? I mean, I have a 5-year-old, and they went to the dentist yesterday, and my wife said in 7 minutes he asked if he could take the mask off 5 times. He's 5.
Well, I have to commend you, Adam, for at least introducing your child to wearing a mask. One of the things that's going to be important in order for this to work is for parents to start now in getting their children used to wearing masks. In my experience over the last few weeks, as I've been out and about, I have seen plenty of examples where families are out and the children are wearing masks. It's not what we're used to, but I don't think it's an unreasonable expectation to think that the kids can handle it. And the governor did point out several groups of people that would be exempted based on their medical condition or based on special needs that they have. But I think kids tend to surprise us when we give them the opportunity to show us what they can do, and we give them positive reinforcement. It's not going to be easy everywhere, and the younger the grade, probably the more challenging it's going to be. But given the stakes involved, I think we all need to be committed to one another, that if we want schools to operate safely, then we all have to contribute to making sure that happens. That includes helping children get in the habit of wearing masks.
What are your teachers saying right now? I remember reading a poll where you said about 69% of teachers felt unsafe. Is that right? Is that still the case?
Yeah, that was polling that we did that just concluded a little over a week ago. And so, yeah, we continue to hear feedback from members. As the summer progressed, more and more people were expressing greater concerns about going back to in-person instruction. And I think it was driven by 2 factors. One was the fact that in the state of Ohio, as in the rest of the country, case numbers continued to rise. And so until we see a sustained level of reduction in the spread of coronavirus, I think you're going to have that apprehension among educators. The other thing, frankly, that helped drive that percentage up of people that are uncomfortable and don't feel that it's safe to go back is the inconsistency in the plans between districts. When you have some districts that are going to 5-day-a-week in-person instruction with very few protections in place, that understandably gives teachers and other education employees pause. And frankly, we're hearing from a lot of parents that are increasingly choosing to keep their children home for in-person or for remote instruction. So I think the more consistency that there is across the board in terms of those protections, mitigating measures that are in place, as well as just getting the virus under control in our communities, that will ease people's concerns significantly.
OEA was pretty adamant that a level 3 and 4 should be remote only, correct? If we're talking about the county alert system, public health emergency. At 2, were you okay with the hybrid? And at 1, were you okay with full-time in class?
So rather than saying whether it should be hybrid or every day in person, we're saying that all schools, if they're going to be open for in-person instruction, need to be able to follow very strictly the guidance of the CDC, including on mask wearing, which of course is a given now, but as well as health checks, as well as hand washing, sanitizing, and 6-foot social distance.
Do you think that 6-foot thing will actually be feasible in a classroom? If we return to full-time class, I think you could do it hybrid, right? Like if you only have 10 kids maybe in a classroom, you might be able to do 6 feet. But to have 20 plus kids, does that mean the OEA will never recommend full-time class again at this point this year?
Not necessarily. I mean, it depends on a couple of factors. One is, what's the physical space that a school has? How many parents are choosing remote learning? Mm-hmm. So if you have a significant percentage of families that are saying, I'm going to have my student learning from home for at least the first quarter, first semester, that means that there are fewer kids in the building, and it's easier to spread them out. It also depends on, how creative schools are in terms of using the common space that they have. So I've seen some plans where rather than using the gym to bring groups of kids in for phys ed, they're using the gym as essentially makeshift classroom space. And then the phys ed teacher is the one that's going from space, and then when feasible, taking kids outside for phys ed class. Those kinds of creative solutions, do make it possible to have in-person instruction, but when you compromise at the get-go on the spacing between desks, that raises red flags for us.
Yeah, because I have seen some districts say at one level will be 3 feet up a few days here in Franklin County. I think we had 7 school districts yesterday. Olentangy parents protesting today. They want full-time return to class. And the ones we've talked to, I mean, it's not every parent obviously, but the ones we talked to are very passionate about this. What would you say to them when they're looking you in the eye and saying, we want our kids are getting hurt by not being back in the classroom? What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I would say to them, and that I do say as I have conversations with fellow parents, and I'm a parent as well. My kids aren't school age anymore, they're in college, but they're also dealing with the reality of changes in plans. So we have those conversations in my own family. But the first thing I would say is that we all want the same thing. There's nothing that teachers want more than to get back to some semblance of normal, where we can be in the room with our students, providing that kind of direct support. We know there's no substitute for that relationship that exists between a teacher and a student in a classroom. So our goal isn't any different. What we're saying is, until the conditions are safe, we shouldn't be putting children at risk. We shouldn't be putting education employees. We shouldn't be putting communities and family members at risk. And so that's why we all need to work together. I would hope that a lot of the same parents that are protesting, plans for, remote instruction will be leading the charge to make sure that they and all of their fellow parents are wearing masks, are exercising good physical distancing now, are modeling good behaviors for their own children, because the sooner we can get the spread of the virus under control in our communities, the sooner more of us can go back to in-person instruction.
One of the arguments from some of those parents protesting, they were saying, if you were to go up to people in the community and say, what is more essential to community, a bar or a school? I think most people would say a school is more essential. So how come we can open up a bar safely, but a school can't be open, the building itself physically?
Well, first off, as we all know, there are a lot of questions about whether it was possible to open bars safely, and that's why we see the governor has issued, the order that he has in terms of, cutting off service, early. But the other thing is that one of the critical differences that I would point out is that, the threat of the spread of the virus increases when you are in confined spaces, especially if there isn't adequate ventilation, and you have groups of people together for extended periods of time. When we're out and about at the grocery store, we're not in direct communication with one person for an extended period of time. A lot of times, the bars and restaurants that people are frequenting during the summer, they're staying outside, they're staying distance, and they're not in close quarters with a small group of people, or a larger group of people for an extended period of time. That's the challenge with schools. If you've got confined spaces, you've got an extended period of learning. For a high school class, maybe 45 minutes. For an elementary class, it could be for the majority of the day. That's why it is so much more challenging. So I think that's important to point that out.
When it comes to PPE, masks for teachers, do you know, are they going to have to buy that on their own? Is the district going to supply it? We heard the governor say yesterday that they were going to get about $2 million from FEMA, but it was unclear if that was for students, teachers. Where does the cost fall?
Yeah, I mean, we have said consistently from the beginning, and I believe the Department of Education, in its guidance that it issued last month to school districts, we've said that anybody that's required to wear PPE needs to have that PPE provided to them, and that's why we've been advocating very hard for additional resources, emergency support from the federal government and from state leaders to make sure that the funding's there to do that. So that said, given the economic climate that we're in, some districts don't have the resources that others do. We're hearing even things like hand sanitizer.
Right.
Is adding millions of dollars to local school district budgets in some cases. And so that's why we need additional support. I was very happy to hear the governor announce that FEMA was providing a significant number of masks so that we can have that for both students and staff in schools. But regardless of the situation, we have been saying that school districts need to make sure that they're providing any necessary PPE, especially for staff, but also, be ready to provide that for students who need it as well.
So again, I go back to the realistic part, because maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like most teachers end up spending a lot of their own money in the classroom on supplies. Is this just going to be an extension of that? I mean, we always say, oh yeah, well, teachers will be provided with everything they need, but I mean, my mom was a teacher. She had to buy supplies for her kids all the time. I imagine to some effect it'll trickle down with masks and hand sanitizer.
Oh, I have no doubt that you're going to see teachers all over the place that are spending even more money out of their own pockets for supplies to make sure that their students have what they need. And one of the things that I'll just point out about supplies is that in order to, again, make sure that there are protections in place to help guard against the spread, it's being recommended that we not share supplies. So rather than having a class set of a given whatever it happens to be, whatever the supply is, that each student needs supplies. And so, yeah, in a lot of cases, teachers are paying out of their own pocket because they care about their students, but it also means that that's even more financial pressure on school districts and more need for community partners, for foundations, for corporations, for others in the business community to step up and provide additional support for schools.
Let me kind of ask you to look into a crystal ball. It's impossible. But, anecdotally, you keep hearing people say, oh, well, it might get worse in the fall and the winter like other viruses tend to do. So if that's the case with coronavirus, if it's only going to get worse for the next 4 months, for those schools that are starting remotely, is it likely that they will ever actually go back in the class in 2020? Because if we're saying, well, it's only going to get worse, what makes us think we're going to have schools open again in the next 4 months?
Well, no one knows.
I mean, no one does know, right? Like, I totally understand that. I just wonder when people say, oh, well, it's closed now for the first 2 weeks or the first quarter of school. Do you think it's going to get better after that we can get in? And if the story is, people say it's only going to get worse, then should we be planning now to have the kids home through December?
Well, I think we need to be prepared for a whole range of possibilities. And I think the question also is for those that are beginning the school year with in-person instruction, that there is a significant possibility, maybe even a likelihood, that you're going to see flare-ups of the virus, which require them to close their buildings and pivot to remote instruction, to go remote. But one thing that we've learned, I think, in watching the experience of other countries is that where community spread is under control, you have seen schools able to open. And again, there have been some cases where things haven't always gone well, but there are a lot of cases where things have gone back to not normal, but again gone back to in-person instruction with protections in place, and they've managed to prevent outbreaks. But again, the spread of the virus in the community is going to have a direct impact on what happens in schools. If the virus is spreading in the community, then schools are going to become incubators of it and can make it worse. If the virus is under control in the community, then, and we have the right measures in place to protect students and educators and community members, then I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to weather this storm. Of course, lots of people, myself included, would say we just can't wait for a vaccine, or a cure to be developed, and hope that happens as soon as possible.
Do you like the idea of, it's probably too late now, but do you like the idea of delaying the start of school a month or so and extending the school year into the summer?
Individual districts are making decisions, and we want to make sure that our members and our local unions have a seat at the table as those decisions are made. There are a lot of collective bargaining implications in that, and so sometimes you have to negotiate the details. But no, we actually, just before we got on, I got a report from our staff. Dozens of school districts around the state have delayed the start of their year, and that, I think, has been helpful for a couple reasons. One is, see if a delay will allow for kind of a decline in the numbers of cases. But the other thing is allow for more time for planning and preparation and professional development, so that teachers have the tools that they need in order to make remote learning successful. And unlike the spring, where we had to turn on a dime with virtually no advance notice, the good thing about delaying the start of school is if it's providing more time for preparation, then that means that we're going to have better outcomes, regardless of what happens. And we have to, again, be ready to adjust to different circumstances and different kinds of operating plans.
Have you found in your surveys and talking with teachers that age affects their willingness to return to the classroom? Does a 25-year-old teacher want to get back in the classroom more than someone who is older and could be more at risk?
Yeah, anecdotally, you generally hear that people that are older, because public health experts have said that above a certain age, that increases your risk factors, and then other, if you've got other underlying conditions, that can have an impact. Interestingly, in our polling, though, our members under 40 have expressed that they are more concerned about going back than our members over 40.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure exactly, what's behind that. It could be that a lot of them, have younger children at home, and they're concerned about
don't want to spread it,
the safety of their own children and their own families. It could be because they're more maybe used to using technology or things like that. There's a lot of things that could explain it, but surprisingly, there's not a direct line correlation between age and people's comfort level in going back right now.
Do you think districts should, with students, a lot of districts are offering the chance to do 100% online for the whole year, and that's just what your plan can be. Do you think the same should be offered to teachers? You can just do your job 100% online this year, and we may have to put you in a different grade level or different class, but you can work remotely. Yeah,
we're addressing those issues in a lot of our locals, and a lot of times it's an individual case-by-case situation. If someone has an underlying health condition, we're encouraging them to seek an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then work through the district with, about their options on that. It's in an ideal world, you're able to have students that want to experience remote learning with teachers that want to provide it. From a management standpoint, it's not always, a clean match, but we are encouraging school districts to provide necessary accommodations to make sure that people are kept safe.
Does this argument sound kind of heartless, but for people who say, I have to go to work at a grocery store, teachers need to go to work in the classroom, and if you don't like it, get another job. Is that just a cruel statement to say, or is that just part of the climate we live in, that you need to be flexible?
Well, we believe that no one should have to choose between their livelihood and their passion, which, people that are teachers chose to go into this profession because they care about kids and they care about the success of kids. They shouldn't have to choose between that and their health and safety and protecting their lives. We're in a situation that, we all hope is temporary. We need to make adjustments to get through this. I hate to see any situation where somebody says, I've got to leave the profession I love because I don't feel that I can be safe right now. And it's posing all kinds of difficult dilemmas, but we're doing all we can to provide support to our members around the state to give them what they need so that they can work doing the job that they love as safely as possible.
Have you seen that happen yet? Have you heard of stories of teachers saying, I'm out, I'm quitting, I'm not going back?
Anecdotally here and there, I've heard of some examples of people that, retired, made a choice to retire sooner than they would have otherwise, or are taking maybe a long-term leave of absence. It's too early to tell if we've got real clear trend lines on that. I just don't know what the data are at the macro level.
Yeah. How often does OEA talking with like local health departments, like Franklin County Public Health, when they came out with their recommendation? Are you guys have a seat at the table when they came out and suggested all schools start remotely in Franklin County, or do you find out afterwards after they've already made the recommendation?
Yeah, because we have members in all 88 counties, the approach that we've been taking is to really encourage our local unions in each of those counties to develop relationships with their local boards of health. And again, there's more than 88 local boards of health here in Central Ohio. The fact that you've got Franklin County and Columbus as two separate departments, makes things complicated. But no, we generally don't engage directly with those local health boards, but our field staff and our local leaders around the state do. Our communications tend to be with state level agencies. We were engaged with the Department of Education and the Department of Health and the governor's office over an extended period of time as recommendations for restart plans were being developed.
This school year, 2020-21, is going to look different. We all agree. The following school year, the fall of 2021, do you think we'll be back to normal by then?
I sure hope so.
As someone with 3 kids, so do I.
Yep. I think we're all in agreement on that. The sooner we can get this behind us, the sooner we can defeat this virus as a global community, because it's not just a U.S. problem, it's not just an Ohio problem, it's a global problem. The better off we'll all be.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation, and I guess I'll just close with saying that I know that tensions are high. I know that there are people that feel very, very strongly about whatever their particular position is, whether they want to see schools open for in-person instruction or they want to see schools open only for remote learning. I think it's really important that we all listen to one another, that we respect where each other are coming from, and in the end that we do all we can partnering together to make sure that we're protecting each other.
All right. Scott Demar from the Ohio Education Association. Scott, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam.
We'll talk soon. See you later.